Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the news from Saba Satellite Channel from Marib. Let's begin with the headlines.
President Saba Al-Alimi declares nationwide state of emergency to protect civilians and restore state authority. Yemen cancelled joint defense agreement with the United Arab Emirates, orders withdrawal of Emirati forces. National and international actors welcome and support the presidential decisions on Eastern governorates. Welcome back into the details. In a major and far-reaching move, Yemen's leadership has taken emergency measures to confront escalating security threats and protect national unity. President Rashad Mohammed Al-Alimi, President of the Presidential Leadership Council and Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, has issued a decision declaring a state of emergency across the entire territory of the Republic of Yemen. The decision took immediate effect and remains in force for 90 days with the possibility of renewal. According to the decree, the measure is based on the Yemeni Constitution, the Gulf Initiative and its executive mechanism, the declaration of the transfer of power, and the President's constitutional authorities. It comes in response to the continued coup against constitutional legitimacy since 2014, and what the decision describes as internal armed unrest carried out by mutinous military elements, accompanied by grave violations against civilians. Under the declaration, all military forces and formations in Hadramaut and Al-Mahra are ordered to immediately return to their original positions and main camps without engagement, and to hand over all sites to the Homeland Shield forces in full coordination with the coalition to support legitimacy, led by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The decision also grants the governors of Hadramaut and Al-Mahra full administrative authority to manage their governorates in cooperation with the Homeland Shield forces until the camps are fully secured. In addition, the decree imposes a temporary air, land, and sea blockade on all ports and entry points for 72 hours, with exceptions only for movement authorized by the coalition leadership. The President directed all state institutions to fully comply with and implement the declaration, stressing that the measures are intended to safeguard citizens' security, preserve Yemen's unity and territorial integrity, and confront actions threatening the country's constitutional order. The move follows days of heightened tensions in the Eastern governorates as the Presidential Leadership Council seeks to contain escalation, protect civilians, and reassert the authority of the state. In another major sovereign decision, the President of the Presidential Leadership Council and Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces announced the cancellation of the joint defense agreement with the United Arab Emirates, citing the need to safeguard the national sovereignty, protect civilians, and preserve Yemen's unity and territorial integrity. In an official decision, the President said the move comes under constitutional authority, the Gulf Initiative and its executive mechanism, and the declaration of the transfer of power, in response to what he described as grave security violations and destabilizing military actions that threaten the state and its legal authority. The decision ordered all United Arab Emirates forces and personnel to withdraw from Yemeni territory within 24 hours and instructs Homeland Shield forces to immediately move in and take control of military camps in Hadramaut and Al-Mahra. The President reaffirmed that Yemen remains committed to confronting the ongoing Houthi coup and preventing any internal military unrest that could undermine constitutional legitimacy or divide the country. He stressed that the state will continue to act decisively to protect civilians, enforce the rule of law, and maintain a single national military and security command, warning that any actions outside the state authority will be delayed within accordance with the Constitution and international legitimacy.
In an address to the Yemeni people, Rashad Al-Alimi, President of the Presidential Leadership Council, said the state remains firmly committed to protecting civilians, preserving Yemen's legal standing, and safeguarding the unity of military and security decision-making. In his address, the President drew a clear line on political representation in the south warning against any attempt to appropriate the will of citizens and exploit their cause for narrow political agendas. He stressed that legitimacy can only flow from the people themselves.
إنه لا أحد يملك تفويضا بديلا عن
No
إرادة
party
أهلنا في
holds a
الجنوب.
mandate that substitutes for the will of our people in the south. Nor does any side have the right to monopolize their cause or exploit it to pursue illegitimate political objectives. Any genuine gains for this just cause must encompass all Southerners without exception, free from exclusion and marginalization, which have only deepened grievances rather than addressed them.
Addressing recent security developments, the President issued a strong warning against unauthorized military movements, describing actions taken outside the framework of the state as a direct challenge to national order and constitutional authority.
أوضح للشعب اليمني وفي
I made it clear to the Yemeni people, first and foremost to our people in the southern governorates, that in my capacity as a Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, I had issued clear directives at the time to prohibit any military or security movements outside the framework of the state or without explicit orders from the senior leadership. This was done out of concern for preventing bloodshed, safeguarding civil peace, and averting the country's slide into internal confrontations. However, these directives were regrettably met with blatant disregard as military formations affiliated with the Southern Transitional Council proceeded to carry out unilateral movements, conduct that can only be described as an unacceptable act of rebellion, unjustifiable by any pretext, and shielded by no slogans.
In a firm rejection of internal escalation, the President emphasized that Yemen's existential battle cannot be used to justify internal divisions or the weakening of state institutions, calling for unity over armed confrontation.
أن الدولة لم تتقاعس يوما عن مواجهة التهديد الحوثي.
The state has never faltered in confronting the Houthi threat, nor has it shirked its responsibilities in securing the elements of victory. However, it rejects the management of disputes through the logic of arms, or the use of the Yemeni people's overarching national battle as a pretext to weaken the state, undermine its agreed references, or confiscate the will of citizens, North and South alike.
Concluding with a stark warning, the President declared the blood of Yemenis a red line, vowing that the state will use all constitutional powers to protect civilians and hold accountable anyone who threatens national security or social peace.
دماء اليمنيين خط أحمر.
The blood of Yemenis is a red line that allows no negligence or leniency. A state that has courageously made every concession to protect the lives of citizens will not stand idle in the face of those who demean their dignity or thrust them into reckless adventures. To this end, we will exercise the full scope of our constitutional powers to safeguard civil peace, enforce the authority of the state, and hold accountable anyone who endangers the security and stability of citizens, whoever they may be, particularly in light of the continued violations against civilians in the governorates of Hadramaut and Al-Mahra.
The Presidential Leadership Council has taken further steps to contain rising tensions in the country's east, warning against actions that threaten state unity and civilian safety. President Rashad Al-Alimi, President of the Presidential Leadership Council and Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, chaired an emergency meeting of the National Defense Council to address escalating developments in Hadramaut and Al-Mahra. Senior political, military, and security leaders reviewed reports of civilian harm, attacks on state facilities, and the closure of Sayoun Airport, following recent unilateral military moves by the Southern Transitional Council. The Council described the actions as a direct challenge to Yemen's legitimate institutions, warning they undermine unified command and risk internal conflict, benefiting the Iran-backed Houthi group. The Defense Council backed presidential decisions declaring a state of emergency and ending the United Arab Emirates military presence, calling for respect for Yemen's sovereignty and support for Saudi-led mediation to restore calm. It reaffirmed that Southern governance grievance must be addressed through dialogue, not force, and approved measures to protect civilians and reinforce state authority.
Member of the Presidential Leadership Council, Sultan Al-Arada, chaired an extraordinary meeting of the Security and Military Committee in Marib to review the latest national developments. The meeting was attended by the Chief of General Staff and senior military and security officials and focused on heightened tensions across the country. The committee voiced full support for the decisions of the President of the Presidential Leadership Council, including the nationwide state of emergency and measures aimed at safeguarding national security, sovereignty, and unity. The committee also commended Saudi Arabia's continued support for Yemen's constitutional leadership and its role in backing de-escalation efforts. Security and military units were instructed to raise readiness levels, strengthen coordination, intensify patrols, and enhance deployments to maintain stability and public order. Citizens were urged to cooperate with security authorities and adhere to official directives during what was described as an exceptional phase.
The country's legislative institutions have lined up behind emergency measures announced by the Presidential Leadership Council amid escalating tensions in the Eastern Governorate. Yemen's Parliament and Shura Council have announced full support for emergency measures issued by Rashad Mohammed Al-Alimi, including the declaration of a nationwide state of emergency and decisions endorsed by National Defense Council. In separate statements, lawmakers expressed deep concern over recent unilateral military movements in Hadramaut and Al-Mahra, warning they disrupt public order, endanger civilians, and undermine the authority of state institutions.
The parliament described the actions as unconstitutional and a direct threat to Yemen's unity and sovereignty, while cautioning that the continued flow of weapons outside government control risked widening the conflict and destabilizing the region. The Shura Council welcomed the President's decision to cancel the joint defense agreement with the United Arab Emirates, order the withdrawal of foreign forces, and transfer military sites to state-run Homeland Shield forces, calling the move necessary to protect national sovereignty. Both chambers praised Saudi Arabia's position in support of Yemen's constitutional legitimacy and de-escalation efforts, urging all parties to halt military escalation, respect state authority, and return to dialogue while refocusing national efforts on ending the Houthi rebellion and restoring stability.
In a related development, Yemen's military and security institutions have moved quickly to close ranks behind the country's leadership, following a series of decisive measures aimed at restoring stability. The Ministry of Defense and the General Staff, alongside the Ministry of Interior, have firmly endorsed the decisions issued by Rashad Mohammed Al-Alimi, President of the Presidential Leadership Council and Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, including the declaration nationwide state of emergency.
In separate statements, the defense and security leadership said the measures were taken under constitutional authority and in line with the transfer of power declaration and recommendations of the National Defense Council, describing them as necessary to protect civilians, preserve state institutions, and prevent further escalation. The armed forces affirmed full readiness to carry out their constitutional duties, defend national unity, and confront armed rebellion, terrorism, and threats to public order. Meanwhile, the Interior Ministry said the security capabilities have been placed at the disposal of the leadership to maintain stability and safeguard public safety. Both ministries also praised Saudi Arabia's continued support for Yemen's constitutional legitimacy and efforts to protect regional security. In a related development, the Saudi-led coalition announced it carried out a limited air operation targeting weapons and military vehicles unloaded at Mukalla port in Yemen's Hadramaut Governorate. Coalition spokesperson Turki Al-Maliki said that the two vessels arriving from Fujairah entered the port without authorization after disabling the tracking systems and offloaded weapons and combat vehicles to support Southern Transitional Council forces. He said the operation was conducted at the request of the President of the Presidential Leadership Council, Dr. Rashad Mohammed Al-Alimi, in line with international humanitarian law to prevent escalation and protect civilians. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia renewed its commitment to Yemen's security, sovereignty, and stability, reaffirming full support for the Presidential Leadership Council and the Yemeni government. Riyadh warned that any threat to its national security is a red line, stressed that the southern cause must be resolved through dialogue within a comprehensive political settlement, and urged the UAE to withdraw its forces and end military and financial support inside Yemen.
The Muslim World League has warned that backing actions outside Yemen's constitutional legitimacy only deepens division and threatens peace, benefiting forces seeking to undermine the country's unity. In a statement issued today, the League expressed full support for Saudi Arabia's Foreign Ministry statement addressing the Southern Transitional Council's escalation in Hadramaut and Al-Mahra, as well as the coalition's running over authorized arms shipments into Mukalla port. The League's Secretary General Mohammed Al-Isa praised Saudi Arabia's firm and wise approach aimed at preserving Yemen's unity under its internationally recognized leadership, stressing that the southern cause is just but must be resolved through dialogue within legal constitutional framework.
Meanwhile, Arab League Secretary General Ahmed Abul Ghaid strongly condemned any military moves aimed at imposing a separatist reality by force. He warned that such actions threaten Yemen's territorial unity, undermine the southern cause, and harm Arab national security, calling for an immediate halt to escalation in Hadramaut and Al-Mahra, and urging coalition members to uphold Arab solidarity and Yemen's constitutional legitimacy.
Thank you for watching and have a good time.